I did. It's too late. You'll see what I found. What you found, Dr. Boothole doesn't have any pictures of you in the field.
I do now.
Yeah, you do now. Are you kidding? I did. They're great. You'll see. Dr. Boothole doesn't.
Too late. Fair enough.
Oh, great of you.
No, correct. I think maybe 152 or 60. Do you know where they moved the health seminar?
Monroe 552.
552.
Oh, there's another.
And college assembly and all sorts of stuff. Oh, right. Partially. Yeah.
Brooke, I changed my mind. I think we need to share our screen real quick. So
Okay.
you're going to share your screen after Amy is done talking.
Hi.
Ready to roll?
So, let me give you the
Just. Good. Hey, everyone. Welcome. Sorry, we're a little delayed. We are streaming this on YouTube, though, so you can tell our folks that aren't here right now that they can watch this on the University of New Orleans YouTube channel. Welcome. My name is May Thomas. I am an assistant professor in biology and the director of the environment program, and very happy to be the person who is welcoming you today for a number of reasons. One is we have an entire week of festivities that we have been working on, and by we, I mean Kimberly Kahn and Adele and all the students in the office who've been working on this since August, and Mark Tobler, and a whole suite of people have been putting together events for you based on what we think you'll be interested in and what you want to hear about, with input from students and faculty and staff. So today's event is one we initiated last year for the first time, and we hope to continue it in the future. But let me just give you a preview first of what we have left for this week, and we hope that you'll join us on one to many of these at many of these festivities. So if you go to our website or just click on that QR code, you can see more details. But the next thing we have today is later tonight, we have Loyola's own Batman, Dr. Hood, leading a walk in Audubon Park, where he's going to teach you all about nighttime mammals and looking for bats and really cool environmental, ecological aspects of bats and why they're important. So if you want to go and join on that, I know the students here who are in my evolution class, it's one of your options for assignment 5 for a nocturnal assignment. So if you want to go to that, make sure you're at the bridge directly across the street. What's the bridge called?
Well, Hurst Bridge, but it's.
Hurst Bridge.
Shouldn't have walks there.
Yeah, so if you just go straight across from the main part of campus and keep walking along that track, you will see it. It's what connects the walking track with the golf course. So make sure you bring a light or at least your phone that has battery so that you can see on the way back, and you walk in groups since if you are going there at night, just be careful, those kinds of things. But it's you will be excited about that once you leave there, especially if there are a lot moving around tonight. So hopefully they are. Tomorrow is actually Earth Day, April 22nd, and since it falls on a Friday this year, we thought we'll have our big celebration on that day. And so we start off the afternoon with a guest speaker that is it was invited by the physics department. And then we follow that up with an Earth Day sustainability fair where many of our students and alum and partners of the university will be exhibiting what they do in the community with respect to environment. And from a recent graduate, Addie Ellis, who's going to be selling and demonstrating environmentally friendly glitter. And you need glitter if you're in New Orleans for every event, so you might want to see that too. People are going to be showing about how they can use leaves to make art, all kinds of really fun things. We're going to be decorating a barrel for Green Light NOLA. Lots of stuff. So come from 4 to 7 in the Palm Court. Also, it started at 5. We have our greenhouse gathering, which is something we've done every year for the past 6 or so, 5 years, Mark says, where we have Loyola students who are musicians play a set on the greenhouse roof, which is the 7th floor. And it's really the only time where we open up the greenhouse to the general public. So if you want to join us for that, that's a great opportunity to go watch a beautiful sunset over Audubon Park and listen to some great music. We're also going to be streaming that and having all kinds of other things. We're going to have games, fun stuff. So y'all come, and some snacks too. And then after the greenhouse show, the physics department is going to be hosting a stargazing event. So you can stay there and use their really nice scopes to look at the stars and learn about them from the experts. Please join us. Tell your friends. We need people to come. We want people to come. Kimberly has worked very hard on this since August, so please come. This isn't working, so
sorry.
Next slide, please. Thank you. All right, so before we get into our speaker, I just wanted to take a quick moment to recognize 2 of our students who were awarded special awards from or through the environment program this year for the work that they've done over the past several years. And so Scholar McLeod is graduating in May in a few weeks. How many days, seniors? Y'all aren't counting? Okay, Dr. B is 14, it can't be 14, it's gotta be more than that. So Skylar is, works in Dr. Bipolow's lab doing research on algae and all kinds of cool things at Audubon Park. And so if you want to learn more about that, you can see her poster that's on exhibit on the 5th floor of Monroe. And just find her. She's got a hat on today too. So there she is. There's Skylar. Congrats, Skylar. She's worked really hard on this project and is receiving the Most Outstanding Environmental Major Research Award from the Environment Program this year. So congratulations. Her award will be given to her at the celebration right before graduation mass on May 13th. So congrats.
Accepted into every grad school she's applied.
And she has accepted to go to her #1 school, which is in Dublin, Ireland. It's called Trinity, to study environmental engineering. So congrats, Skylar. That's awesome. All right, next slide. Verily can't be with us today because she had another meeting for her Spanish minor, but she is receiving the Most Outstanding Environment Major Service Award for all she's done during her 4 years for the environment program. She, from the very first semester, has volunteered to help in all kinds of ways. Students who are environment majors, you get group messages from her. She's the one that keeps everybody in line. She's served as our DSAC rep the last 2 years and presented some research that she did at Rice University with several of us in the fall based on a J-term class about addressing environmental racism in New Orleans. And then she also presented her research at a national conference in the fall where she earned first place for her research in the undergraduate mentored research competition. So that's pretty cool. She did her work in my lab and it was a social science project. First one I've ever done. So that was interesting and fun. So congrats to Verlene. When y'all see her, tell her congrats, please. And then finally, we get to the last slide that I want to take the time to discuss. And my talking notes are in my backpack, so let me go grab them. I am ecstatic that the committee that put together and started working on Earth Week in August reached out and asked for nominations for students who graduated from our program. And our program is young, for those of you who don't know. Our program was established in 2012. So we have 10 years of graduates that have come through our program. I should know the exact number, but it's not an old program, but it has been a fruitful program since the beginning. And we've had lots of students that have done really incredible things as students here, both in the realm of service, in research, even in teaching and outreach events. And so the two students that were invited to, I'm sorry, not students, alum who were invited to present today are two students that actually have done some similar work. So they're going to tell you about the work that they do. And so let me read their bios for you. Brooke actually just moved away from New Orleans 2 months ago. Otherwise, she would be here in person. She's going to join us on Zoom, and y'all all saw her a minute ago. Brooke is a graduate of the Loyola Environment Science Program, where she studied insect pollination with me. She was the executive director of Sugar Roots Farm, a 501c3, it's a nonprofit, teaching farm in Lower Coast Algiers. She helped transform the organization into a community hub centered on food sovereignty and land stewardship. Sugar Roots provides fresh produce, meat, eggs, honey, and medicinal herbs to the greater New Orleans region. Sugar Roots also diverts thousands of pounds of community waste from landfills each year and uses it to generate healthy soil. Brooke's excited to continue her work in addressing food and land justice initiatives as a member of Sugar Roots Board of Directors and at her new home and farm in Chesterfield, Massachusetts. So she'll tell you more about that, and she'll tell you how you can get involved in Sugar Roots here if you're interested. Great place to go and do an internship. Our second speaker today is Mel Sferrazza, and she is shown here in a picture. This is so not Mel, but this is the picture she sent me from her LinkedIn. You're going to see the real Mel when she speaks and shows you other pictures, but I told her I'd use this for her intro. She graduated in 2017 with a degree in environmental science, concentration in biology as well. She worked at, these are her words, under the wonderful Dr. May Thomas. I didn't write that, she wrote it. But we'll just say she worked under me. She completed a senior thesis exploring the diets of honeybees. After graduation, she spent over a year working on organic farms ranging from Washington State to different parts of South Africa. And she'll show you where she lived when she was there. You'll be excited about it, students. Since then, she's gotten involved in the world of CEA, and she'll explain what that means, in New York City, where her primary focus is biocontrol and increasing crop yields. In her spare time, Mel can be found binging true crime podcasts or poorly playing her banjo. And she's looking to move back here, so keep that in mind. So, without further ado, Curry, if you could help us. Again, while he's switching over to Brooke, she's going to go first to talk to us about the theme for this talk is turning your passions into a purpose, innovations in urban farming. Specifically, Brooke's title is Agroecology and Community Sovereignty. So they're going to talk to you about this. And again, I want to remind everybody that we are streaming this live on the Loyola YouTube channel. So the program will be there after if you want to share it with any friends that get goosebumps about urban farming, or if it just is very meaningful to you, please feel free to go there and watch it as often as you like. Are we ready? Perfect. Thank you, Kurt. All right, Brooke. Good to see you. So you make sure you unmute yourself when you share. Yep.
Thank you. I almost forgot. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming today and listening to me and Mel. It's exciting that I get to talk with Mel. We were roommates and really good friends in college. So, yeah, so I'm super excited to get the chance to talk about my time at Loyola today and how spending time there with my professors and making relationships brought me to where I am today. And where I am today is I currently live in the hill towns of Western Massachusetts. I moved there in January. It's a very rural landscape. A lot of folks haven't been to it, and it has some of the old growth forests that were here many, many years ago. And it's a very beautiful place to be. I moved here with my partner and some friends, and we started a farm when we moved here called Stonehill Farm, where we are growing diversified fruits and vegetables, medicinal herbs. We raise livestock as well. And I also work for an organization very similar to Sugar Roots, where I was before, called Just Roots, and I always answer the phone and mess that up. And Just Roots is a food access organization like Sugar Roots. And they actually have the largest low-income CSA in the state and possibly even in the country. So I've been learning a lot to bring back to Sugar Roots from that experience. As May mentioned, I worked in New Orleans for quite some time. I lived in that city for 11 years, and it still has all of my heart. So I'm glad that I can still be a part of some of the organizations there. Well, I thought I would start off with my timeline over the last 10 years. I was one of the original folks in the environment program. It was brand new. And because of that, I think we got a lot of special attention, which I feel very grateful for. But I started at Loyola as a sophomore. I transferred and I was really struggling. I was a psych major. I really felt directionless. Wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So I ended up taking a gap year. And I think my family and I were a little bit nervous about that, but it ended up really helping me solidify what my passions were, what my interests were, and then what to do from there. So luckily during this time, I was working and saving money, and a dear friend of mine who is a primatologist offered for me to go with them as a volunteer to Paraguay to do some research. So when I was in Paraguay at a place called Para la Tierra, it's a remote research station, and there are all kinds of scientists there. I got to work one-on-one with some of the best herpetologists and ornithologists and entomologists and primatologists, and shadow and walk in their footsteps. And it was there that I really sparked my interest in field research and conservation. I came back to New Orleans, ready to go, decided to study environmental science, took the intro course with Dr. Thomas and Dr. Hardy, and just, immediately fell in love. I reached out to Dr. Thomas and said, I'm interested in insects. How do I study them when we don't have an entomology course? And of course, Dr. Thomas opened up her big wings and said, come on in and we'll design a course study for you to study insects. So this is an awesome opportunity. We got a textbook. I worked in a lab collecting and pinning insects, identifying them, studying their behavior, studying their basic biology, and got to know everything I wanted to know about insects, including a lot of things I didn't want to know. And so after this sort of course study really started to shape into a research project for my junior year, and it became my senior year thesis, which was really great. And I was able to knock it out early and do as much research as I possibly could over a couple of years. So Dr. Thomas and Dr. Hardy supervised this project, and I studied insect pollinators in urban parks and gardens, which was perfect for me because I loved watching insects do their work of pollination, and I loved hanging out in parks and gardens. So it felt like an easy way to get credit for classes, and it was also just so informative and fun. So that was obviously a huge experience for me to like set in stone what I was going to be doing later in life. And I learned so much about what plants are pollinated by what insects and what species are present in the greater New Orleans area and in places that we plant wildflowers and insect attracting plants. I couldn't get enough of the research. I cross-enrolled at Tulane, which is something you can do if folks don't know this. And I think you can take one credit a semester, maybe more, someone can correct me, but I took a course on experimental animal behavior with Dr. Karubian at Tulane, and I signed myself up kind of unknowingly to write a second research paper and sort of thesis at the same time as my one here. So that was a little tough to balance, but I got to study another thing I was very interested in, and it was apes in this case. And I got to study the effect of visitors on captive Sumatran orangutans. Shortly after this project, and we got to present our research to the zoo staff, the Sumatran orangutans were moved into a different enclosure, which has really helped. Another student followed up with this research, has really helped diminish the negative impacts of visitors on their behaviors. After I graduated, I sort of applied for and got the job thanks to my connections, especially from Dr. Thomas at the Audubon Nature Institute's insectarium as an entomologist. And this job was so fun. We got to go out in the field sometimes and catch insects. We took care of, the role was animal husbandry for a diversity of life, from birds to alligators to insects, and even black widow spiders. So I learned a lot in that experience from a bunch of passionate bug nerds. And then the huge part of this role was education in a museum setting. So we interacted with guests and told them about bug conservation and why bugs are important. And that was a really beautiful experience. But, things don't, what was going on in my head was I was ready for a new adventure and I was missing the jungle. And I really wanted to keep studying monkeys or primates of some sort. So I ended up contacting Tulane's Department of Biological Anthropology, thinking maybe I want my PhD in primatology, and went to another remote jungle space and got to spend my days following monkeys, my days and nights following monkeys up and down mountains and cliffs, and basically from the moment they wake up to the moment they go to sleep. And that was definitely the kind of isolation and an adventure I was looking for, and even more. And during that experience, I learned so much about data collection and worked for a few different universities while I was there, studying both trees and primates just to make a little extra money. But I found this was probably one of the most profound few months on my life, because I tested my body, my mind, dealt with severe social isolation and pit vipers in my shower and all kinds of things. But it really helped me build my confidence into I can do anything I set my mind to, given some certain parameters. So that was an incredible experience, but also taught me one thing: I don't want to do field research in one space for the rest of my life. Shortly after that, I got this is kind of moving into seasonal or temporary work. If you do environmental field work, a lot of it is going to be seasonal or temporary, which is something to think about. I really enjoyed it, but one of my mentors from Tulane University and dear friends, Laura Kelly, is the tribe historian for, I think, 3 different indigenous tribes here in Louisiana, and she needed a research assistant for an archival project she was working on. It's a federal recognition project for the Pointe tribe in Southeast Louisiana. And this was a cool experience. Got to visit, these tribes, and especially the Pointe, but also the Biloxi Chitimacha, and got to go out and learn their way of life and how they work in fishing and what their tribal customs were in their culture, and got to be really embraced into a community and also learned some really sad and rough current and historical context for where the tribe stands now. And I think out of this experience, I took so much of seeing how devastatingly impacted these tribes are and vulnerable because of oil companies cutting channels through their backyards to move oil, and how that brings in more intrusion and land loss. And now there's already been one tribe force relocated, and the Ponishen in the last hurricane lost over 70% of their homes, the tribal members. So the way of life for a lot of Indigenous peoples, I was learning is, and I'm still connected with these tribes, is disappearing quickly. And without federal recognition, they do not have money to relocate their tribes, nor do they get any help when things like harmful algal blooms are happening in the Gulf, disrupting their way of life due to industrial agriculture. I continued after that position was over. I went to Mexico a few times there and back, working at a spider monkey sanctuary. Many of the animals there were basically people were researching how to re-release them in the wild because they lost their homes due to forest clearing. And I also worked as an educator for teaching responsible earth education. So this is a part-time position. And if you are interested in doing alternative outdoor ed, this is a program that currently exists in New Orleans and all over the world, and I highly suggest it. It's a immersive, theatrical, hands-on, play-based learning curriculum that happens all outdoors. In this case, it was in John Lafitte National Park, and teaches kids core science curriculums in the most fun and imaginative way. And I really enjoyed being able to teach and teach about conservation and have children have their first chance to be in nature, often for many kids. And it was quite amazing. And we talked to kids about what they could do at home and what their families could do to reduce their environmental impact. But something in this curriculum that was missing was farming and how people get their food was never something we discussed. And I always questioned why that wasn't there. A lot of these part-time jobs and basically small scale, like temp jobs, allowed me to do so much volunteer work in New Orleans. And some of my favorite places are Community Kitchen, which makes weekly meals and brings them to home insecure and food insecure folks. And Speakeasy Garden, which is a community collective gardening organization that has focused now more on mutual aid and medicine, less than food. But at the time I volunteered there, it was food. And I worked at farms up and down the East Coast for month-long summer busy stints. I promise I'm getting through this list quick, but I want everyone to hear the opportunities that there are out there. Because I've done way too many of them. But Mono and Mono is another program. I worked for 4 consecutive summers. It's a month-long program, and it is a school that opens up for migrant farm workers' children. And in this area in Maine, where I worked, the migrants were Passamaquoddy, Mi'kmaq, and a lot of Latinx farmers who come up to pick blueberries, harvest broccoli, work on these giant monoculture farms. And their housing is usually right on the farm. And there's a lot of sad truths that I witnessed, face to face in these huge industrial farms where folks are crammed into small living quarters, sometimes 4 families per single room with 1 bathroom. Children 12 and up can work in the fields as long as their families are there. So there's a lot of child labor happening. And then one of the saddest things to me was that we had to teach children and adults about pesticide safety because companies would spray the fields while workers were in them. So this really opened my eyes to like the nasty corporate corrupt greed that happens in industrial farming systems, and how by using undocumented labor, they can exploit their workers and often not pay them. And that really got me going and excited and passionate to start working towards migrant rights and farm worker rights. I got a job as the farm manager. It was only 15 hours a week, only paid 15, ended up being closer to 50, but working at a giving garden in Pigeon Town. And it was called Okra Abbey because it was a haven for folks to come and access basic resources, shelter, a place to lay their head. It was all outdoor, but a lot of covered spaces, snacks, water, a friendly hand, someone to talk to. Weekly, we had meals prepared by renowned local chefs from our produce, and we'd have a big sit-down dinner with anywhere from 20 to 80 people. All of the folks who frequented the place are experiencing housing insecurity, food insecurity, and or many suffered with mental health issues or drug dependency. And this experience showed me we could not produce enough food for folks who needed it in that community of Pigeon Town, and that there needed to be more organizations doing that, or better, we need to address our food deserts in our city. And during that time, an opportunity of a lifetime fell in my lap, and that was I happened to be talking to the right people at the right time and got a job as the director of Sugar Roots Farm. I do not have a nonprofit business admin background whatsoever, but I did have a lot of the skills and resources necessary to run a farm. So I jumped on the opportunity, and it has been, obviously the most formative experience in my life, learning so much from the community, the people I work with, other farmers who came to help, our board of directors. And we'll get into a little bit more about Sugar Roots later. At a certain point, I handed Sugar Roots over to someone who's very good at business administration, and the farm is doing great. And I serve on the board of directors, working about 4 to 6 hours a week with them. Then when I moved, I got this community engagement coordinator position with Just Roots in Greenfield. And I just co-founded Stonebridge Farm with a past Sugar Roots Farm employee, my partner, and another Loyola Environment Studies program grad. So I feel very lucky. I know that was a lot of talking about my life experiences, but I think the importance that I want to bring out is, or my conclusions are, I came to where I am now by pursuing my passions. And sometimes I would even list them out, or what my goals were for that year. And it really helped me. Studying flora and fauna, obviously, is one of them. Connecting to people around food, alternative education, accessible healthcare, conservation, food justice and food sovereignty, migrant and indigenous rights, land access, land stewardship. These are my passions. And what I discovered at some point was that conservation, food access, healthcare issues, animal rights issues, environmental crises, humanitarian issues are all linked to agriculture. Not entirely, but parts of them are affected by agriculture. And I thought, if we can change the current system that we have for our agricultural system, we can change some of the issues that the rest of the planet, the people and the animals on it are facing. One thing to note is, well, how do you pursue and find your passions? And I don't think they were ever just brightly clear to me at the moment. I think what helped me was just fostering relationships with professors, organizations, and people that I admired. So in these photographs, I have, just as an example, for when I first started getting into insects, I went and studied with a beekeeper that lived in Abita Springs just to see what it was like. Before I got my job at the insectarium, I was pinning Zach Lemon's private insect collection, going out on black lighting events and learning more about bugs. And of course, that's probably partially why I got the job, just having a connection already. And I went and visited Vernon Brew, who has the largest insect collection in the Southeast, and maybe like as an individual, maybe one of the largest in the country. And so going out there and exploring and meeting people and asking for mentorships in whatever way you can, these things all really benefited me. And those were the people on my resumes giving me outstanding references. So even if I wasn't qualified, they said she could do it. And that really helps. And also taking chances, being messy. I think sticking with things that work and dropping the things that don't work. And, I walked away from the insectarium after 7 months of working there, or 8 months, but I knew I didn't feel like I was getting pushed. I didn't feel like I was learning very much new at that point. I felt like I was antsy and I wanted to go do things, and that's okay. Just find ways to walk away from them where you can maintain your relationships with the people that matter to you. In all these considerations, I was led to prioritize spending my time studying and advocating for agroecology and food access and equity and local farm systems. And I think agroecology is what I chose to talk about today because it is an umbrella over food access, equity, and local farm systems. So agroecology is a set of farming principles, a scientific discipline, and a social movement. It's a little bit difficult to describe, but the way I like to view it is right now, our predominant agricultural system is industrial ag. It's a globalized system where food is produced and shipped all over the world. Agroecology is an alternative to that system, but it's a local system. It is worker and consumer centered instead of corporation centered. It blends traditional and indigenous knowledge instead of just what makes the most money and what is the fastest. Its practices are based on ecological systems, which is really fascinating to me as someone who studied science, and I think there's always more to learn, and produces food with little environmental impact, predominantly because it limits uses of natural resources and non-renewable energy. It focuses on making sure that farmers have economic viability, and so do community members. Right now, farmers, probably even a very experienced farmhand, is going to make $15 an hour in this current economic system. And someone who's working for an industrial farm is often making even less if they're just a farmhand. So it basically integrates a lot of things you've heard of before: organic farming, diversified crop rotation, biological pest control, integrated pastoral and crop systems, and agroforestry. If you have any questions on those things, you can send me an email too. I'd be happy to talk about them. Considers climate change, soil health, human health, and biodiversity. So again, this is a system that's looking at how it impacts people, how it impacts the economy and the environment, and it integrates interdisciplinary systems. So as an ecologist, we invite you to come to this agroecological farm to help us learn more. As a sociologist, we invite you to teach us how we can make these foods work for the community that we have. The same for economics professors. It really integrates different systems. So I wanted to give you a glimpse of what agroecology looks like in practice, or at least in my experience. These are places that I have worked where I've witnessed components of it. This doesn't mean that they're perfect agroecological organizations. There are some that are doing much more ecologically sound work, but I think it's something we're striving towards. Let me just go back really quick too. These are all photos taken from Sugar Roots Farm, by the way. We would harvest oyster mushrooms, making sure to leave some so that their spores could spread. We were growing some crops in natural swamplands. We were harvesting natural plants like elderberry, leaving those to form shade zones and plant other plants under them, and distributing food to folks who identified as food insecure. So one example in Sugar Roots Farm that makes me think of agroecology is this concept of full circle farming, which is simply that the community takes their waste, whether it's individuals' compost or a sawmill's sawdust or a tree company's mulch or a coffee shop's coffee grinds and casks, and they bring it to the farm. And those are inputs from the community. Those inputs are utilized to generate healthy soil through the compost process. That healthy soil is spread and given as food for our plants. In addition, the soil is amended through our animals' feces, through manure, composted manure. The soil is rich, feeds our plants. The plants then go back to the animals, go back to the community members, and the cycle continues. So it's a way of keeping community inputs and outputs all in a cycle together. We integrate local organizations and businesses with our farm plan. So it's not just Sugar Roots Farm on that land, and it's not just Sugar Roots Farm that does our programming. We work with Algiers Proud, which is an organization that identifies food insecure members in the Algiers community and picks up our produce, delivers them door to door, checks in with the community members to see how they're doing and what their needs are. We worked with Delta Flora to plant a lot of native plants in our swamp and swampland ecosystem to highlight wildlife habitat. We work with local restaurants. We have beekeepers who keep bees on our property. We feed the bees. They give us honey and pollen. They pollinate. And herbalists have used our herbal medicine, sold things back to us, or it's kind of a big sharing circle of land access. And I'll just keep skipping through some of these. One of the big points is soil management. So we, as you can see here, we use diverse cover crops, which provide habitat for all kinds of wildlife. Eventually, they get mowed down, fed back into the soil to provide healthier growing areas, and they feed the soil nitrogen. They provide more plants for pollinators. They distract insects from eating the plants that we have in beds. And right under my picture is a nice picture of that seed diversity. We use natural pest prevention, so a lot of hand picking. It's unfortunately what you have to do in a lot of situations. These are all off of like a couple leaves during one point in the season. We do use a lot of natural plant oils like peppermint or neem oil to help with that, but we don't want to hurt the biodiversity in our area. We use natural basically dewormers or pathogen prevention. So this is mugwort in the wormwood family, and it helps to worm our goats and chickens, and you if you ever have worms. And then another method of natural pest prevention is one of our fields. We have chickens that run on the outside of this field. They keep the weeds suppressed so the weeds don't go into our garden beds. They also eat the insects all around so that we don't have to spray or use anything, because really the chickens keep the pests down quite a bit. I think some of the other big points are using square foot gardening like we have here. This allows for wildlife to have more space. We have 7 acres of land that is totally reserved for wildlife. We're not doing anything with it. We let it be. Planting like this, or being able to plant plants that are shade tolerant and non-traditional, this is great for conserving wildlife. Every nook has an area where something can be planted, and we don't need to drop entire forests to plant row crops. And the amount of food we grow is pretty incredible, thousands of pounds in these small spaces. We operate, I think the gardens are less than 2 acres, probably 1.5 acres. So another way of realizing agroecological systems is at Just Roots, and Just Roots does something, they share land with other organizations. So there are organizations that grow and sell pollinator plants for people's yards and gardens that have their own plots there. There's a mutual aid organization that does herbal medicine work, a hog farm. a compost network made up of formerly incarcerated folks who started their business picking up compost and making soil. And World Farmers, which is a program that invites refugee farmers to take a stab at farming on a piece of land if they came from farming backgrounds where they fled. The last point I'm going to cover a little bit in here, if I still have a minute. So I want you to just think for a moment and imagine local farms as a building block of a community. If every community had 1 or 2 local farms, what could the world look like? And at one point, it did look like this. And so I'm thinking of that it's very difficult to imagine agroecology on a larger scale. And I think a question that comes up for me is it attainable to do this on a larger scale? And how can we further integrate these systems into our public institutions? And that's the question that I think will make a change. And you see this happening here in Massachusetts, but we can improve food access programs hugely by engaging the institutions that already exist. For one, I just want to point out the fact that the United States does not have a problem with food production. If any of you have ever dumpster dived before or seen what food waste is like in this country, you know that thousands and thousands of pounds go in the trash every single day of perfectly fine fresh fruit, meats, vegetables, everything you can imagine. It is not a problem of production, it's a problem of distribution, because there are also equally as many thousands of people who do not have access to these things. If we can improve food access, we've already improved our system hugely of the waste that goes into landfills and of the people who need nutrition coming from fruits and vegetables. One thing that I've seen at Just Roots that I think is amazing is that they engage ACOs, or accountable care organizations. And these organizations are basically healthcare conglomerates that look over different primary care providers. And what happens is those ACOs provide farms like Sugar Roots or Just Roots with grant money to give subsidized shares of fruits and vegetables to communities that need it. And in return, these folks have access to better health, and the ACOs, sorry, am I going over time? I see that.
You're good, but we're gonna wrap up and then we're gonna take questions at the very end. I forgot to tell you that.
Cool. Oh, absolutely. So I can pause there. And if anyone's interested in learning more about sort of what it could look like to engage agroecology on a larger scale, these are some notes for what it could look like. But the big point and picture is that we can stimulate local economies through doing this. Local artisans could be making local value-added products, local groceries, selling those local foods. Restaurants use local vegetables. There's job opportunities in distribution and transportation. Farms are accountable to their community members to keep things safe, and also like food safety. And also farmers are paid for and don't have to outcompete with industrial organizations. I just listed a few ways, a few farms, and we can send these out if anyone wants an email that you can get involved with here in New Orleans that I've worked with or had partnerships with. There's different ways of interacting. So even if you're not a manual labor kind of person, skills of many sets are required for these things. And we will also hopefully be able to send out a resource guide if anyone is interested in looking some of this stuff. Thank you.
That was awesome. Thank you. Proud of what she's done in the short time since she graduated. That seems like a long time to y'all, but that's a pretty short time. So now we're going to switch over to Mel, and Mel's going to talk about from B's to CEAs, and explain what all that means and tell you about her work.
So let me get my notes up. Oh, yes. So
and then we'll do a Q&A at the very end.
Cool. So, oh, is that my mic? Okay. I was amplified. Okay, so I also work, so fees to CEA, just for some context, I did honeybee research in my undergrad, and then I moved into the world of CEA, which is controlled environment agriculture in New York City primarily. So I'll talk a little bit about that. Let me just get my notes up, and I need this guy. Oh, I got it. Okay, is it this? Okay, cool. So who am I? Again, my name is Melanie. I'm just gonna put this here for notes. I graduated in 2017. These are pictures. Hang on. I'm popping up my notes right now. You know what? I got it. It's better this way. All right, so this is me when I was an undergrad doing some honeybee research, and I'll go into that in the future. In this slide, this is me looking at my pollen for my research, and that's me after graduation. I worked on a couple of farms in the southern part of Africa, and I'm very poorly trying to grind up grain for bread, and it was hilarious to all the people that do it every day. So that's why I'm laughing. So how I became interested in research. So I was super lucky to be connected to Brooke my freshman year, my sophomore year, and Dr. Thomas, of course. And Brooke actually was the one that I went with her. I think the first time that we ever met each other through the environment program, we went to the park and I saw her doing some of her collections, which was a fun experience. And then Dr. Thomas, I pledged my life to her, so I don't know what else to say that I've already said. Okay, so how I became interested in research specifically. So Brooke connected me to a farm that is now called a different thing, which I'm not super sure about, but it was Southbound Gardens. And at Southbound Gardens, I got into permaculture, which is a lot of the stuff that Brooke was doing as well. So using principles of already natural ecosystems and incorporating those into agricultural practices to cause the least amount of disruption, which I really, really loved. But while I was there, I heard about an elusive man in the lower ninth ward named David Young, who has basically after Katrina, he moved in and bought up a bunch of cheap land, started raising bees, an excessive amount of bees. He's still there. You should definitely go visit him. It's an experience. This is him walking around his 2 pet goats in the lower ninth ward, and he was genuinely confused when people thought that was funny, which I always thought was really funny. So he actually was the one that taught me how to beekeep. And the more that I kind of worked with him, I just began to, notice little things that he was noticing. And one thing that he brought up to me was especially at the time that I went to undergrad here, I think probably still because I went on a canoe trip yesterday and saw some Chinese tallow trees. But there was a huge Chinese tallow tree population, which I think was still the case. And he had a bunch of them on his property as well that weren't removed. And he had mentioned, although the Chinese tallow is super invasive, the bees really love it and the honey tastes sweeter, which I thought was super interesting because I never heard any kind of positive spin on an invasive plant before. It's always negative, which, but so I thought that was pretty interesting, which kind of got me thinking, I wonder to what degree do honeybees in New Orleans use non-native versus native plants in their diets? So that moved me into my research. That's him again. I took this picture like an hour before, like 20 people got swarmed with bees in the lower ninth ward, which is a very insane day. So this is us getting ready. There's some people that came down, we were teaching about beekeeping. So what my research entailed, so on Southbound Gardens property, I set up some beehives, and then this here is a pollen trap. So the bees would make their way through the pollen trap, and it would really gently knock off that little pollen pellet that was on the back of their legs called a corbiculus. And then I would basically, using a microscope, mix them in with deionized water, and you can kind of tell them apart just by their morphology. So that's those little vials there are just what the pollen looks like after I've begun sorting some of it. So I sorted a ton of pollen and found out that they actually used about 70% of all the pollen that I looked at was from non-native species, which I thought was really interesting. Then again, I did have 5 beehives and, in the middle of the city. So it really depends on what plants are around those specific honeybee hives. So you have to keep doing this experiment probably all over the city to get like a really accurate depiction. But anyways, this is me at the National Undergraduate Research Symposium, and where I just told a joke that killed it. And I won 2nd place, so I'm very proud of that picture. Right behind Michael Paskovich, which he deserved it. He was 1st place. Okay, so then after graduating, so yeah, during my time at Loyola, I can't stress this enough. Every single opportunity that I got that got me to where I was working in New York as well was genuinely just for meeting people and connecting, those people connecting me to other people. So I took advantage of as many opportunities as I could. And then along that path, I ended up finding out about woofing. So woofing is it's willing workers on organic farms. So it's really awesome. If anyone's in the environment program and wants to take a year off after you graduate and you still want to learn stuff and travel, you should definitely look into this. Please ask me about it. It was the greatest experience of my life. It's just a work exchange. So you can go anywhere in the country and work on whatever farm you want. So if you're interested in certain skills and the farm that, you're looking at a farm that is teaching those skills, you basically can email them, go and work. So you're labor and you're also just doing different things around on the grounds for them. So that's a picture of my friend Mish. We were in South Africa in the greenhouse. We were doing sunflower microgreen production. And I had a really awesome time. I went to some farms in Washington and then a couple of different ones in South Africa. These are some of the other crops that we were growing on the farm. That's a picture of me again, grinding up grain and very, very poorly. Some more pictures. I was looking for a spatula and there was a snake in there. So that was definitely an insane way to start my day in the morning. I don't remember what kind of snake it was, but it was genuinely a terrifying experience. And then I lived in the back it was a really cool piece of property. And so they actually had like a refurbished hospital, like the back of like a hospital truck. And so that's what I slept in while I was there. So that's me in the hospital truck. So that was a really, really great experience. And then, so I did that for about a year. I came back, and because of the experience I had with my undergraduate research and just knowing the scientific process in itself, I got a job pretty quick in the CEA industry in New York, where it's really, really taking off. So CEA, Controlled Environment Agriculture. So this is 2 different places that I worked. Both controlled environmental agriculture, which is a ton of research is going into that right now because it's in its very infancy stage of technology right now, but it uses less water, less space. So this one was a farm that's on top of a rooftop in New York City, and so that way, in places where there's a huge population, very, very dense population, there's you can still grow food without having to, drive 25 miles outside the city. So that's one of them. And then this one here, and I had another picture which disappeared, which makes me think it's into a different version, but it's okay. We were growing inside of shipping containers. So there was a picture of a shipping container on here. So essentially the idea there is to grow vertically in shipping containers, and then that way you'd be able to stack a whole bunch of them on top of each other and make like a farm skyscraper instead of having a horizontal surface. So that is, and another huge thing is typically in cities, the soil is super unhealthy just because there's so much pollution and there's, construction and all of that. So both of these were soil is growing without soil and recirculating systems. So the water always made its way back into the main tank. So we use as little water as possible. Okay, so what I did there primarily was biocontrol, which I really, really loved. So I did insects and disease management on plants without using pesticides, which is in most places that say they don't use pesticides actually there's a lot of loopholes, but we really didn't use pesticides, which not many people do. And those little guys that are like a 0.5 millimeter long will destroy your entire crop. Those are thrips. And so basically you wind up with really disgusting looking products like that or basil like this. And these guys are aphids. So instead of using pesticides, we would actually, I did send you an old version, but that's okay. That's all right. So I would use beneficial insects essentially. So for the aphids, my research, this whole job was essentially just research. It was research project after research project. So for aphids, we would release parasitic wasps that would attack aphid populations, and then the wasps would lay a little egg inside the aphids, and once that egg hatched, there would be another aphid that was born. So I studied those populations of parasitic wasps inside the farms, as well as I've tried every method under the sun to try and control thrip populations, and ended up using parasitic nematodes to kind of keep populations down, but those are always super tricky. Disease management. So this was my kind of final project while I was working at Square Roots. And this basically was, so you're looking at here is a petri dish. It's a petri dish collection of just what's in the air at all times. So the way that you figure out, you get some type of disease in your crop. So that's powdery mildew. Yeah, I'm sorry, I know. That's powdery mildew over there. So if you want to figure out what's basically inside your environment in a closed room, you can do a test by putting out a petri dish and leaving it out for an hour and then just letting whatever landed on there naturally just grow. So there was a ton of stuff growing on the farm, and powdery mildew, which was a killer as well. And another thing was I would identify waterborne diseases essentially just on patterns of growing. So it's kind of hard to tell, but there's an area here with much smaller plants next to much more developed plants. So I would have to kind of mess around and do different things to understand what's going on in the environment. And I would actually use a bacteria called Bacillus subtilis, which secretes antibiotics. And that outcompetes the bad bacteria. So that was like a really huge savior. And all this, I learned while I was at Square Roots, but the whole foundation was set up for me because of the research I did with the Oh yeah, okay. So this is a very condensed version, which is perfect. Again, I'm moving back to New Orleans. I can answer any questions. I love talking about this stuff. That's my email. Do you have anything to add?
She's selling herself very short. I mean, the work that she did here turned into a really great job in the tech field based on undergraduate research experience. So I love to brag on Mel because of that, because she's so nonchalant about it. But from New York City, Long Island is where she's from, to New Orleans, she came here because of our police class.
Yeah,
She told me she showed up here and ended up like killing it in all aspects because she had such a great attitude and was saying yes to everything. Like, yes, I want to try that. Yes, I'll ride my bicycle overnight. Yes, I'll wait tables, here and these things. And all of that led to these incredible jobs. And after 5 years of being out, you realize
I'm ready to come back.
Yep, she's ready to come back.
New York was tough for me, but I'm ready to come back.
And ready to go back to school.
Ready to go back to school. I genuinely mean it though. I was just talking to Dr. Thomas about this up in the lab. Every single thing that has ever happened to me was because I just tried to show up to as many events as possible. Tried to talk to, Brooke mentioned this a little bit as well, but just tried to talk to as many people I found interesting and took time to, out of their day to talk to me, and then I just tried to follow up with it. And yeah, I genuinely mean it's the more that you show up to things that you're passionate about, the easier it's going to be to get to where you want to go. So yeah, that's the one thing I hope you take away from this.
And one of the things also I would tell Mel is the culture now, because of the pandemic, is we don't all get together. We don't all go to things. And so I'm really pushing and hoping that, when you see your students were here in droves and they, bring their friends, for every event, and y'all were leading, lots of things and saying, hey, can y'all take us out to John Beach and do a night tour or whatever? And we've gotten away from that. We're not getting on sale at all. But I'm saying, we need to get back to that. Don't y'all bring that? Maybe, or maybe you enjoy being behind the computer screen. I don't know. I want to get out in the field. So being present is definitely something that allows, opens up doors, in other words. You don't have to have a master's degree to get, a dream job right out of college. You never know what it's gonna, I mean, she's only 5 years out of college. You've done a lot.
Feels like 20 years. But yeah, no, definitely. I think it's also, Brooke again mentioned a lot of these things, but especially while I was in New Orleans and you're in this amazing environment where people are so kind and they'll open their homes to you. And you just got to show up and try and put yourself out of your comfort zone as much as possible. Actually, that Belize trip that Dr. Thomas was talking about, I think I oversold my photography skills to you, and that's like how, because I got in a year younger, so I taught myself to use the camera before I went. It's just honestly put yourself out of your comfort zone and keep just showing up. Yeah. Cool.
Thank you. So, we'll take some Q&A if anybody wants to ask questions about experiences. The other thing I'll just, while we're switching to see Brooke again, is that, all of these things, like she worked with Brooke to volunteer and help. A lot of y'all sitting out there doing the same things now. And that's really how you get started. And like Brooke said, if you don't like it, move on, do something else. You gotta find your passions. So students, especially and faculty staff that are here, feel free to, Grace has the microphone, so if you want to ask a question or to either Brooke, Mel, or just make a comment, love to hear from you.
No questions?
Okay, hi. Hi, Craig Lynn here. So Brooke, you did a presentation, I think about 3-4 years ago, a roundtable where you went rapture. And I asked you this, and it was at the very end. So scale. So, it is an issue. What's your 1 or 2 things about being able to scale up? There's 1.2 million people in the South Shore, Greater New Orleans. Would we need 10,000 Sugar Roots farms within, say, 10 miles, 20 miles? Could even be farther than that. So obviously, probably 98% of food in South Shore, Greater New Orleans, where from India, et cetera, et cetera.
I think that's a really great question. As someone who's not an urban planner or a world planner, I could never give you that amount accurately, so I won't even try to do that. But I know that industrial farms are not space efficient, and we have housing crises, and they use a huge majority of our land. So I can only imagine that if humans could move onto some of those lands and work their own small scale farms in the future, that we would have maybe a farm every 20 miles or something like that, that could care for the surrounding people of that area. I think we need to reallocate huge, massive amounts of industrial, what is becoming wasteland quickly, to give to people to run farms, especially BIPOC communities and folks who haven't had access to land for a number of years. I hope that answers your question, but I think it is possible on a big scale. I mean, look at the innovations that we've had over the last 100 years. To think that we can't set up some farms to be able to provide for the people who live on this planet is just unacceptable to me.
Well, I was doing very different work from Brooke. We were building like a food farm skyscraper. So It's difficult. Yeah, I think that I worked on both types of farms, and it's, Brooke obviously knows much more about the small scale topic, but I do believe that at least New York City is going kind of like this ag tech route, and I think a lot of major cities might wind up going that route as well. So I don't,
Especially in New Orleans where we're landlocked.
yeah. So that could be a solution, you know.
Great, so there's a question back.
Question for Mel. Can you explain what hydroponics are?
Oh yeah, for sure. So hydroponics is just soil is growing. So you can have outdoor hydroponics farms. So essentially, yeah, that's good. Actually, let's explain that. So you, one of my jobs was to basically mix salts, you know, all the things that we need in our bodies, plants also need. So I would get, you know, things like nitrogen and magnesium and to a different recipe per crop and just mix those water soluble salts and mix them into water. And then that would, you know, a series of pumps would recirculate that to the crops and bring it back to kind of the main tank. So that's, yeah, it's just soil is growing.
Don't we do that here? I know that Rouse's downtown used to have hydroponics on the roof. Did anyone know about that? Dimitri, y'all doing that at New Circulating?
Once in a while. Podium.
Oh, wow, no way. Oh, that's aquaponics. That's cool. Nice. You did it inside the prison? That's so cool, actually. Yeah.
Like environmental architecture to stop with help with housing problem that we have. More advancements.
Yeah. Did you hear that?
No, not at all.
Oh, okay, my bad. Can you hear now?
Yeah.
Okay, so I was wondering, basically the advancements in environmental architecture that would help our housing issue that seems to be a big problem with being able to create more farmland, local farmland, because we're constantly trying to make lands for living and tearing down environments and stuff. Has there been any real big advancements in those architecture, trying to unify both people and environment, I guess, or maybe just sustainable architecture or sustainable what we have?
I'm sorry, it was cutting out a little bit. So I know you're asking about sustainable architecture. Are you asking if I've seen any examples of that applied in farm settings?
Yeah, like has there been any advancements done in just the time that you've been around for housing, just improving the types of houses that we have to be able to compensate for land loss? Like, or is that a thing?
For some reason, I'm sorry, I can't really hear the question. I'm not sure if it's not, maybe Mel, if you repeated it.
Okay, well, he's asking essentially if you know if there's been any like advancements in environmental like housing developments and things like that to, you know, because those two, like farmland and housing, are competing for space basically.
Yeah, I'm not sure of any housing authorities. I know that that are utilizing, you know, or competing with gardens specifically in the New Orleans region or where I am. The only thing I know of is that housing communities are actively trying to build gardens around their communities. And this is very present in Massachusetts, at least. Every one of the housing communities that we work with, I think there's 8, have community gardens. So I think that's a great thought to think, like, how can we co-build housing communities around farms or farms around housing communities? But I'm not sure of any, maybe Singapore, I feel like they would be the one place that would nail that.
I think there's, it's not the field that I work in, but just, I know that there's, in Japan, they're incorporating algae into, like walls to, I don't even fully know, but maybe someone else knows a bit more, but I know they're, oh, do you know?
No, not that I want to talk about.
Oh, that's okay.
Well, she's in Boogalow's lab. Where's Boogalow? You left?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I know, there's definitely stuff going on. It's just, just not stuff that I necessarily focused on.
All
But
right, so 2 more questions, I think, so.
So because you guys have both worked in different versions really of agriculture and agriculture technology, and one of our biggest problems with sustaining agriculture is the urban sprawl that we have, especially here in the States, where so much of our land is taken up by like suburban communities that just have these empty lawns. From your different maybe points of view, is it more effective for us in our future building aspects to go for vertical farming or vertical housing?
That's a really great question.
I think it could be both, honestly. So you can, a lot of people, you know, I know people that they're incorporating kind of these hydroponic systems inside of homes. So I think, especially inside cities, vertical is the way. Well, my opinion is vertical is the way to go, just because of, you know, there's just such limited space. But Brooke.
I mean, I tend to stay, like, I really like the idea of continuing to farm in the earth, where there's these complex ecosystems that are impossible to recreate or very difficult to at this moment. So I think neither for me, but I know that both of those things are a huge issue, housing and having enough food. Again, I just go back to, like, I think we have land for food. I think we have distribution problems with food. And yeah, so I think, I guess having tall housing places would be fine, but I think also just looking at urban sprawl, like, can we actually incentivize somehow how people can take their plain lawns and turn them into food and pollinator havens? That would be the most interesting option for me.
All right, 2 more questions.
I just had a question about your full circle farming topic. What are some ways that we can do that on like the home level instead of like a full scale like farming business level?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I said, what are some ways we can do full circle farming at home, like personally?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I think just conserving your own compost, or think about things at home that usually go to a landfill that don't need to. So all your food waste is obvious, your coffee scraps, your cardboard, or things that normally you would throw out or recycle. Those things are all inputs for your garden. So I think you could have a miniature full circle happening where you are. And there's so many more creative ways of doing that, like catching rainwater and harvesting and using that for your garden. And I just imagine like keeping your home as much of in a system as possible. And maybe you even bring in neighbors' compost as an input. But I think that it's almost easier to do a full circle at home than it is elsewhere, bringing in community inputs. Good question.
All right, last one.
Hi, I just want to say thanks y'all for this. I work at the Circling Farms Coalition, which is an urban farm for justice nonprofit in Central City, so I appreciate your work on CDAs and for your work with the urban farming. It's a small network in the city, so everyone knows it. One thing I wanted to ask y'all is in terms of access to food. If we're growing food in the city, one thing I realize is we have issues with is getting the food out to people that need it. I do a lot of SNAP and EBT assistance, and having to navigate DCFS has been a real issue for me. So I don't know if y'all have insights on how. And in Massachusetts and New York, DCFS is a lot different than how it works down here. But that's been the biggest issue of getting food out to people. Like CCFM has a SNAP market match where they match $6 to $1.20. But other than that program, I can't really think of anything else of getting local food that's grown to people that, that are in need for food economically.
Yeah, I could definitely start on answering that. I think you're right. Massachusetts and New York are very different, but it doesn't mean that we can't strive to ask from our government programs the same thing. So my first thing would be like form a committee to advocate to RTA, New Orleans RTA, to say, hey, can you guys sponsor some like free service time to get people transportation to and from to pick up produce or something like that. That's what the organization I work for now does with their FRTA. That's one option that is a little bit more in the future. And the second one is what Sugar Roots does is they work with organizations or find sister organizations that are already doing work that involves transportation. So we found Algiers Proud, who does a lot of deliveries to folks in need. They weren't doing produce at any point, but sometimes canned food, clothing, transportation to and from the grocery store. And we formed a partnership with them, and they took over that transportation, especially since they already knew community members in that area. So I would guess like organizations like Catholic Social Ministries or Catholic Social Charities, like places like that that already offer transportation might be good places to link up and see if they could get produce into people's hands for you or in assistance.
I worked at for-profit farms in New York, so it's definitely not something that was difficult to sit with, but just because the technology is so new, definitely wasn't the most affordable form of basil, but so yeah, Brooke, that's definitely more Brooke's realm.
And that's fine.
And that's why I'm moving up. One of the many reasons.
Finding a better fit. All right, y'all. Well, thank you so much for coming, and let's thank our speakers. One day you'll be up here talking as a featured alum, so keep that in mind. You never know. Jennifer, I didn't see you there before. Thank you for all you've done to help. Yeah, with our week. I appreciate it. All right, y'all. Enjoy your afternoon.
Bye.
Bye, Brooke. Be in touch. Wish we could go to lunch.
Oh, yeah.
Wish we could go to lunch. I'm out of here. I didn't say. That was fun.